Friends, welcome back to Reiki Crossroads and Connections, where we are exploring practices that help us to be rooted, to be spacious, to be connected, and to remember ourselves. And we're doing that through conversations between a Reiki teacher and practitioners of other modalities that engender these feelings inside of ourselves. Everything from yoga teachers to artists to gardeners. And today I am really excited to have on for this conversation somebody that I've been friends with for a really long time. And we've gotten to observe the evolution of each other's practices and seeing those points of intersection, those points of commonality, and those points of differences change and grow over time. So it feels very sweet to be having this conversation today with Grace Osborne. So I want to welcome you in. It's really great to have you.
Really wonderful to be here, and thank you for inviting me. As I said, when you reached out, just feeling so humbled and excited because a big part of this healing journey that I'm on right now and that I'm exploring through my practice is because of the work that we did together at Mills. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, Grace and I, as she just said, met at Mills College. I was trying to remember what year that would have been. When we're
2011 or 2012.
11, 12, yeah. So we've been connected for a good long time. And you were there studying music theory and music history through the music program there at Mills, which I found fascinating. I have music in my family, but not in my direct experience. And so I always loved hearing about your studies. And then from there, you went on to New York University, where you have received your PhD in ethnomusicology. Um, and it's there where I got to just kind of glimpse little pieces of that journey as you shared on social media. And, we began to see these points of commonality coming through. And so, you're a creative, you're a healing arts practitioner. You share that passion and those talents through sound baths, through your work as an Usui Reiki practitioner. We have that in common as well, and through the mediums of a sound walk, sound installation, sound baths, all of which just really bring to my imagination some amazing experiences. And you have kind of traveled through that educational journey and through this journey of really taking on these media, these forms of practice, these forms of art, not only into your work, but just really into who you are as a person. And you've come to this really interesting place of the liminal, right? You're in this liminal space, and friends who are listening, as Grace and I were kind of chatting about this episode, we found this new point of commonality that we hadn't known was there, which was this experience of coming to a point in the evolution of our practice where there seems to be some tension or some conflict between the way in which our chosen practice is enacted out in the world, in culture, in our communities and society, inside of the constraints of a capitalist structure, and our personal values, our vision for the truest expression of what it is that we were intending to do when we started on this journey, that there's this tension that can develop. And I really resonated with that. I felt like that would be such a valuable conversation to have with our friends here. So I want to just invite you to just share whatever feels like it has heart and meaning about that journey. I kind of just gave the overview, but any piece of that you want to share, as far as perhaps how you came to studying music, how you came to kind of music and spirituality and culture being so intertwined. And then we'll shift into this experience of the liminal.
Thank you for opening up the portal. Yeah, kind of where to begin, because I really do experience the world and also believe that all of the things are connected. They're not somehow separate, and they inform each other and uplift each other. So I guess I'll start a little bit with like how I kind of got here, and then speak a little bit about like what I'm sitting with and kind of like what I'm dreaming and hoping for. And so I got to where I am now, integrating my creative life and my healing practice because I was very sick. And so that was in about 2015, 2014. And I was doing this doctoral project that was super more mainstream classical music. And then I was fainting all the time. I had
Mm.
really bad eczema, like my skin was falling off of my body in some parts. And I just was really not well. And so in my spiritual background and lineage, often sickness means that the spirit is speaking to you, that there's something going on that you're not paying attention to. And basically the message was, you're a healer, get on the path, or else you're not going to feel better. So the choice was really like, do the work or don't do the work. You
Yeah.
decide how you want to feel. And so I asked, okay, well, how do I do that then? And there was no answer. So at that point, I realized, like, okay, I just have to try my best to um, appreciate all of the unique aspects of my lived experience and where I come from and who I am, and not worry about it making sense and just go into it. And so I prayed and I was open looking for, like, okay, where is the next step? And started meeting people or seeing flyers like sound healing, Reiki, all this sorts of stuff. And so I started volunteering at an alternative healing center, met an amazing sound practitioner and also psychotherapist named Katie Down. And she became my mentor for a couple of years. And that's how I kind of got into doing the sound baths. But I had already been doing like deep listening, meditation, sound walks from being at Mills. Pauline Oliveros is such a big figure there. So it all kind of just clicked and made sense. And I just started to show up whenever I was asked to offer something. I would offer my sound practice, and it felt meaningful to people. And I felt restored giving it. And I realized, oh, this is what I will study. This is the practice. And what I found through talking to people, listening to their stories, was that there was this common narrative coming out in the data. We all want to do this practice that's accessible to anyone because we all are deserving of healing, which is absolutely the truth. And we all have a unique way of offering it that's special and very valuable. And then somehow something gets lost in the soup or the mix between that very clear vision and then how it actually manifests in the world. Where and I noticed this myself in my own practice, where I looked around, I was like, wow, nobody in this room looks like me, or they come from a very different class background as me, or I can't really afford to do my practice in the spaces where I want to be doing it. And so I was kind of like, where do I go from here? And so then the pandemic hit and I realized, okay, I really need to sit with all of this and figure out what's really going on. And a dissertation really helps with that because all you do is sit and write and think about it. And so what I realized, a big part of the piece that I wasn't really acknowledging, partially maybe because I didn't want to, was the social conditioning through capitalism that kind of permeates our values and our morals in this country. And I don't mean that as like a judgment statement at all. I just mean it as like, this is the water, the ocean that we're kind of like swimming through. And so how do we account for that and make the most of the condition? And basically the conclusion I came to was, we need to reassess our values to more collective models of I wouldn't even use the word ownership, but maybe stewardship would be a better word. But like, maybe it's sharing a space instead of every individual person having to own their own place or pay rent to a place. Maybe it's something more collective. Maybe we share instruments when it's feasible and makes sense. Maybe we're doing partially a sliding scale, and part of it is full-time. And then in my own practice, I realized because there was so much that I needed to figure out and that I couldn't do it alone, I needed to take a break.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. There's so
You say
much
something.
there. This kind of arc that you're describing, there's parts of it that feel so familiar and parts of it that feel very fresh and that I'm very curious about. But that starting point of coming to the work out of some form of crisis, that feels so familiar and so familiar to so many people that I've worked with and talked with that, for many of us, we come to healing work because we ourselves have experienced some kind of devastation and have found something that helped us to traverse that transition, to work through that liminal space, to come out on the other side feeling more whole, more healed, however we would describe that better place, that stronger place. And then we want to share that, we naturally want to share that with others. And then this tension that you're speaking to, right? We want to share it. And at the same time, we want to be able to devote ourselves to it. And what that means is that we need to make money doing it, right? Because we have to earn a living, right? And how to navigate that space is a conversation that's happening in so many different spaces that I'm in. And I have so much respect for this choice that you just named of like pausing and taking a break, of saying, this doesn't feel like what I intended. It doesn't feel like the full expression of what I'm here to do. And yet, because that right there could be a point of letting it go altogether, right? There, it's like that's a real choice point of like, my values aren't aligned here, right? Do I leave it? Do I pause? Do I push through? What do I do here? And as I shared with you before, like my version of that was realizing that the arts that I was practicing were disconnected from their Japanese origins, and that was something that never felt right, but that I'd really ignored for a long time because I just wanted to be in it and learn it, and it was really serving me well. And then that point of kind of misalignment with my values, that point of not being in full integrity, just was like that disease that just knocked against my head until I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I did almost give up my Reiki practice. And there was happenstance that pulled me back in and kind of brought me on this path of learning more about the origins. But I just so respect this choice that you've made to pause and to assess and to take a step back and say, what would it look like for my practice to be alive in my life and in my community in a way that feels like it's in good integrity. And some of these questions that you're sitting with, I wanted to just name, starting with, where do we go from here, right? And like, what is this next phase? What does it look like? And I know that you're already kind of feeling into answers to that, right? You named a couple of them already, but I wonder if we could just kind of spend a little bit of time in this place of questioning, and maybe just talk a little bit about what it felt like to make that choice. As we talked about in our first conversation, I think this is a space that many of us do come to, but we don't talk about it, right? We want to talk about the other side of it. We want to talk about what happened when we figured it all out and then we moved forward and it was all great. That's where we want to talk about, right? And we want to jump over this place of like, I don't actually know how to do this. And for in your case, you just got a PhD in this subject, right? You've devoted yourself to it in so many ways, and then stepped out into the world to offer, this work, and then chose to take this pause, right? So I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about, how that felt, kind of how you came to that decision, and just kind of what it feels like to be in that messy middle. And I know that's a vulnerable question, but I really feel like that's really a gift to have that conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. I can just say that it doesn't feel good. And there is a lot of value and beauty and importance in discomfort. And it's not easy because it can bring up a lot of things depending on how much you were supported in your early life and being like your fullest expression of your full self, or not. It can bring up a lot. So for me, what it felt like was heartbreaking, because I really thought that I had come to a place where I got it. Like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I know, how to do what I'm doing. And then I realized that actually that wasn't true. Like that
Mm.
yes, I know at the core of my being, I know who I am and I'm very confident in my gifts, but I didn't know how to balance bringing that into um, reality in a way that felt authentic and nourishing, because that's the other part is like once you start doing whatever your healing practice is, you have a really close connection with your body and your spirit, and know whether or not something feels good, even if you don't want to admit it, um and so part of it again with my body, like carrying my instruments all through the subways, and I was just so exhausted, and I was like, I know in my body and my spirit that this is not the right way. I shouldn't feel exhausted after I do this practice that I love. I shouldn't feel resentful if I didn't make as much as I thought I deserved or should have. Um, and so that clued me in that something wasn't quite right. Um, and to just be okay with that. And part of the being okay was that like I just had to get a 9 to 5. But I was really specific in the type of 9 to 5 that I chose, that I wanted to work in a place where it really was 9 to 5,
Right.
not we email you at 7 p.m. and can you work, like it really has to be 9 to 5. And so that really freed up a lot of things. Actually, it's like when I'm at work, I'm at work. But then when I come home, I'm not exhausted. I don't work usually on the weekends. So I have less time to do the work I want to do. But the time I do have, I'm energized and I'm more focused. Um, so that was really helpful to kind of like take a break, take my mind off of it and put my mind on something else so that in the background it could kind of like ferment and percolate. And then I started dreaming, like literally and metaphorically about like, well, what would it look like and what would it feel like? And I realized that, it's not about doing sound work every single week and seeing 100 people. It's about, even if it's just one person, and really making a difference in terms of like how they see their life condition or how they experience the present moment, and they carry that with them, then I know I'm fulfilling my part of my bargain of this work. And so that, again, the conditioning, more is better. The glossy, perfect picture makes it better. And I just had to be okay with like not caring what people thought. Like if people look at me or lack thereof, because I took down my website and they think that I don't know what I'm doing or that my practice isn't as valuable, it's really not my problem if they think that, because I have longstanding clients that still come because there's something unique about what I offer. And
Yeah.
I have trust. I trust the universe that the right people
Yeah.
will come. And they have been. That's the funny thing is like I took down my website, but I've gotten more and more requests that I have to keep turning down because I'm not ready yet.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. There's a couple of really important threads in what you just shared, and I want to be sure to kind of pull each of them, in their own way, but they're also connected. And the first is just kind of on a practical level, right? How does a person navigate a liminal space like the one that we're describing here? And you shared a couple of things in there that I want to highlight that are, I think, really powerful strategies when we've chosen to take that pause. And first off, you named the discomfort of that. It's so uncomfortable, right? To have been on a path, to have made commitments, to be moving forward, and then to put the brakes on, and to be in that place of really questioning. So uncomfortable. And I think part of why we don't have this conversation about the liminal space, and we don't, teach ourselves and each other ways of navigating it, is because we don't know how to deal with that discomfort. And so, there's a number of ways to approach that. But just from your story, I'm hearing, firstly, we have a bit of an advantage in that we already had a practice, right? That helps us put more room around that discomfort, right? So leaning into what we practice what we preach, right? Which is like, yeah, obviously, but how often, I know this has been true in my life, how often those of us who, practice or teach some kind of something that is designed to help us be more well and whole and sturdy and resilient, and then we just kind of forget to do it for ourselves, like we
Yes.
just decline to apply it to our own experience, right? So, I think it does need to be said, right? That we come to these practices for a reason. We come to them for ourselves. That we come to them because they serve us, and we can't let go of that. So that would be the first thing that I heard. And then this thing around, flexibility, right? I'll get a 9 to 5. I'll take care of the financial realities and needs of my life in some other way, but I'm going to put boundaries around that, right? I'm going to say, all right, in the past, maybe I would work a 9 to 5 that was actually an 8 to 8, but, but for real, like I'm going to hold a boundary around my time. And this is something, I love that you mentioned that this transition really came forward during COVID time, because so many points of dis-ease in society were really highlighted during that time. And so, we see this trend or this emphasis now on holding employers to the boundaries that are set. This is what my job description is, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to do more than that unless we're going to renegotiate. And so I hear that, I'm going to keep it to a 9 to 5, and then observe the impact. I have more energy, I have more time, I feel more spacious, I'm not stressed about the money, and so I can really be with my healing art in a way. I can reestablish my relationship with that. And so those, are just a few things that I heard that for others listening, if you're in this space of transition and you need to pause, or you're going to just need to be with the unknowing of something for a while, those are some specific strategies that can be really supportive. The other piece that is so important is in this space that you're in, really noticing these places of disconnection between your values and the oppressive systems that we live inside of. And, some specific ones you've named, this pressure towards bigger, better, more, right? As you said, and this reevaluating of what it means to be successful, right? If I work deeply with one person or one small group, or I do that once a month instead of several times a week, and there's true impact that happens for those people, right? That is an incredible success. And that doing that versus all of these people and I'm depleting myself, that is not the way to define success. And that feels so aligned with what I've learned over, my years of traversing a similar, questions of what does success look like, and knowing and trusting that that all of these practices, they come from the inside out. And so any person that we help to be more of themselves, to be more grounded, more whole, more spacious, we can trust that that's going to impact more people. Right. And so, I'm curious about that. If there's something that you have noticed around impact, right, and redefining impact. And then the other piece that I want to just name before I forget is this piece around working in isolation. This observation that you made that part of what this capitalistic structure and this white supremacist structure that kind of organizes us in a hierarchy of like the person in charge, the best, and everybody else below. And that person, first of all, is seen as, better and has a lot of power, and they're expected to be in isolation. And so what does that look like in our practice when we take on, okay, I am now an expert in this, I'm now a leader in this, and, that gives me power, but also now I'm expected to work in isolation. I'm expected to be by myself, to be the one in charge, to do everything. So those are two pieces that I wanted to be sure to name. So that was a lot. But there's these pieces I wanted to be sure to name. But yeah, circling back, if there's anything else that you wanted to share about strategies for kind of being in that uncomfortable space. And then I'd love if you have any things that you've noticed around that shift to working in a more distilled way, working with one person at a time, working less frequently, but with perhaps more resources and spaciousness because of this time that you've given yourself. I'd love to know if you've noticed any, just what you've noticed about that shift.
Again, I think it comes, for me at least, my experience comes back to our own practice, because when you and really make it an everyday kind of thing, even if it's only 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, but coming back to making contact, building that relationship with your practice, then your inner vision is really clear.
Yeah.
And so coming back to my sound practice, like just playing with my bowl in my apartment and just listening, or just doing an om and seeing where it takes me, stuff just is, it seems like waiting to come out or waiting to be realized. And then the values become really clear, like, okay, what is really important to me? Why am I doing this work? And then once you have that, it makes it easy when to say yes and when to say no. Or you feel that impact being made because you are in alignment and you're clear. But another big part of it is like that healing work of unlearning,
Mhm.
like being okay with things not looking the way that maybe we've been taught they're supposed to look, or ways that people will reflect back to you that you are good at what you do and valuable. Like unlearning that, and that part is I think an ongoing thing, because we're meant to be in community and we're
Yeah.
meant to be connected, and so having that reflected back feels good. But the other half of it, to balance it out, is that I have found for myself, I have to be okay with sometimes it not being reflected back, and just sitting with that and holding it. um I used to consider myself a realist, like, oh, I'm not an optimist, I'm a realist. But now I see myself more as this real optimist. In other words, like, I would not have been given these gifts or met these people if I were not meant to share them in some kind of way. um Maybe it's not going to look the way I thought it would, but um just have have faith, and not in a like, oh yeah, I'll just do whatever. No, like, be very clear about your values and what's important to you, but also be really open at the same time that it can look radically different
Yeah.
than what you think it should look like. um and that is actually so freeing, because then you don't have to be the one that makes everything make sense. And um instead, it can maybe help to think of like, what kind of collaborators can I put out to the universe that I want to partner with. Like for me, for example, where I'm at is, I'm realizing if I can understand the financial part of this, like, should I do an LLC, or, maybe that's something that I can offer to other practitioners, or maybe with like a nonprofit to make like fiscal sponsorship, something, make that possible. So that that piece doesn't have to feel like it's so everybody's figuring out for the first time on their own. Or maybe we make like, some online document or something about like best practices. Because the other thing is, like, really just very briefly, like, once you do have a full-time job, then the tax part does kind of, depending on how you're doing your work, it can get tricky. um or if you do want to like collectively own property, again, like, you kind of need to know a little bit about the laws in your state, or like what kind of things you need to do. And so putting it out to the universe to have the right collaborators
Yeah.
um takes off some of the pressure of like, I have to figure it out by myself, and I have to figure it out right now. Because there actually really is no rush, despite the world being very much on fire. Not trying to negate that, but just trying to, I guess, like, emphasize that that you can trust
Yeah.
your process, and honor it, really honor your own process. um yeah.
That makes me think of something a mentor of mine said once, which is, when you're really pressed for time and things feel really urgent, that is the time to slow down.
Yes.
And it felt so counterintuitive, right? Obviously, because the obvious thing is you're pressed for time, it's very urgent, speed up, push more, push harder, push faster. And I've sat with that advice, over the years and keep unpacking layers of wisdom there, including that when things are urgent, when things are on fire, when everything is pressuring us to speed up, that's the time when we need to be at our fullest capacity and we need to be our clearest minded and we need to be, reaching into our resources as thoroughly as we can. And we can't do that when we're rushing. We can't see things clearly when we're rushing. We can't follow intuition in the way that you've been describing. All of these pieces of your story that you've shared have all included some moment where you listened in, right? From those first prayers that you asked for guidance, from the divination where you said, how do I heal this? And you got the answer to become a healer. Well, how? Well, no answer there. You get to spend the time it takes to figure that out, you get to
Still
slow
doing it, still
down,
figuring out.
right? And yet continuing to listen and, just this piece around you might not know how to do the thing. And again, we can't do all of the things, but we're told that once you get to a certain point in your life, you're supposed to do all of the things, or you're supposed to delegate them out to other people, right? Rather than be in this kind of more messy collaborative space. But you can listen, for who the right collaborators are and slow down and wait. And that's so hard to do when we're feeling the pressures of everything feeling so urgent. Um, and, again, back to being able, having practices that help us navigate discomfort, because that's really uncomfortable to be slowing down when everybody is speeding up. So I
And
think that's
also
good
just
advice.
like questioning, like, what is the discomfort really on, or around, I should say, because some of that discomfort could be the very thing that one would need to heal in oneself to actually be a better practitioner.
Right.
Um, yeah.
And we think about it, what does the world truly need, from everybody, but particularly from those who are focused on what healing and restoration might look like. If everything is speeding up, perhaps part of the medicine is the slowness, right? Is the care, is the taking time, is the being in the messy space, walking slowly through that valley of liminal space, where we're not yet what we're going to be. We're no longer what we were, and we're just in that unknown space. I feel more and more that actually is part of what is needed. Um, you know, realigning with the seasons, right? We don't want to do that. We want to be able to have what we want all the time and eat what we want all the time and, continue going to work like there isn't a blizzard outside or, whatever the conditions are. And, coming back into alignment with seasons and with the world, that can sound kind of, quaint. Oh, that's a cute idea. That's so sweet. So outdated. But truly, right? So much of the toxicity of how we treat each other and the world, is related to, if not directly stemming from, believing that we can opt out of the way that the world actually operates, that we can just take a big old step out of the constraints and the opportunities that the cycles of the earth provide for all of life, and that we can do things differently. And slowing down, I think, is such an important piece of realignment there. And so, yeah, I'm hearing that medicine in the stories that you're sharing.
Yeah. And I really want to go back to what you said about the, like, it's sounding idyllic. And I think that's just such a funny, it's humorous to me, a funny way of looking at it, because when we look at how the world changed during the pandemic, where waters were cleaner, animals were returning where they once couldn't be because of all the tourism. It's
The skies over LA were clear for the first
right. I'm
time
just
in decades.
kind of like, is it not clear that the way that we're living will be our demise if we don't change something very soon? So it's like, is it idyllic, or is it like, this is what we need to actually survive? Because like, the planet's going to be here. Earth will be fine. She will be here. It's whether or not we will be here.
That is correct. That is correct. Let us, again, part of the, human supremacy, right? Is like, yeah, there's this, we have to save the world. Oh, she's gonna be okay, right? She's got time to heal herself from all this, And yes, there'll be losses. There have been losses, tremendous losses, but that's nothing new in the history of the earth. Extinctions are normal, right? And, we just happen to be bringing about our own extinction, and that's not normal, right? That is new.
Exactly.
That is what is new in the history of the world, right? Mastodons did not bring about their own extinction, right? um, and so yeah, the earth will prevail and will continue, but we will not, ultimately. And the conditions under which humanity either extinguishes or evolves, you know we have some control over that, but not all control, right? And so really, like, having some humility about what actually we are doing here, right? And that we're a creature who's fouling its own nest, and that is a doomed creature indeed. And so how do we do that to the scale that is appropriate for each of us, right? And there are people for whom it's appropriate for them to be working on global levels. It's appropriate for them to be in front of the masses and to, do work that is touching millions of people at the same time. That is not most of us, right? We need those people, right? Um, Most of us, though, are going to have a very small sphere of influence. And being true to that sphere and to be dedicated to that sphere of influence is part of this work. And so when you say, if I can work with one person really powerfully, really deeply, really effectively, that is exactly the right scale, right? Despite what others might want to assess about that level of success. We
And
have to be.
but also, like, think about if every single person did show up in their little
That's right.
space, how huge that would be. Like, I think that's also a big part of the mindset, is like every single action is connected, and all of our communities are connected. This idea that like somehow we're isolated is really, I mean, there's a balance to it, of course. Like, there is isolation that's real, but at the same time, if every single person showed up and just gave an ounce of their practice to one person,
Yep.
that would be huge. We
Exactly.
have to all be, you know, like you said, global superstars to make a difference and be important. And also just realizing that our value is like not based on the magnitude of our work. Like, we're still all worthy of love and importance and value just for being.
Yeah. Yeah, that mythology of the superhero and of the savior and the enigmatic leader, again, we do need those people, right? Like, we're very grateful for those people throughout history who've been able to, galvanize attention and resources in that way. But the vast majority of change and of benefit to humanity happens on the person to person level. The vast majority of change happens in those small spheres of influence. And every enigmatic leader who has led thousands and millions and brought messages to the world could not have done it were it not for the person to person, the each one teach one, the everybody doing their part, but probably almost none of them being recognized for that. And I don't mean recognized as far as accolades, but simply recognizing that the work was done, right? Because when we do that, then we can feel the responsibility of it, right? We can say, oh, okay, so then I should be working in my sphere as well, right? And as you say, if we all took that up, truly, if we all really took that up as a way of life, it's part of my way of life that I'm going to interact with my neighbors in these ways. And that doesn't just apply to people working in healing arts. It's everything. Like truly, that is how the world changes. And we see that. And um, you know, I guess we're just here inviting everybody to pay attention to those pieces.
And also just affirming that your practice is valuable and that it matters and it has impact, even if you don't see it as impactful the way you see somebody else's practice as impactful. Like the going back to the very beginning, that first session that you gave me, like it totally tripped me out. I was like, whoa, I'm seeing colors, energy, what's happening? And it opened up a door that had not been opened before. And I'm sure that you were not intending it like, oh, let me like be part of this force that changes Grace's life. Like, I'm sure that wasn't probably what you were thinking. If it was, awesome. Maybe I
I
got it
can't
mixed up.
claim that that thought was in my head, but what I wanted was to have a positive connection with you and to engender something that felt good. Yeah.
And it wasn't immediate either. It was something that kind of opened something up and dislodged what I thought was like normal and like everyday experience. And I didn't really know how to handle it. I was like, oh, what do I do with this? And yet when it came the right time to step into my practice, I already knew what a good session, not a good, I don't want to use that word, what a meaningful session feels like. I already had an embodied experience that I could draw upon.
Yeah.
So again, like having that trust that like the seeds that you plant
Right.
are impactful is
Exactly.
important, because then we take ourselves more seriously and trust ourselves, I
Yeah.
think.
This yeah, this message has been showing up for me this week. I'm just now noticing it, like, oh, it was there and it was there, it was there. It was, it was in a gardening video I was watching yesterday talking about liquid fertilizer, right? You only need a capful in a gallon, right? Don't put more than a capful. You're gonna roast your plants. Like truly, you only need this much influence, right, in this sphere of influence, to have a positive impact. Too much of it is going to actually be a problem, right, in this situation. I was working yesterday with my teaching partner on our Reiki teacher training program that I've been kind of dreaming into for quite some time, and really trying to kind of work out the structure to be strong enough but also flexible enough, because I wanted all the people to come and get this training. And what really came clear yesterday as we were kind of beta testing it with somebody who's going to come into the training this year is that uh, part of what I was doing was diffusing it too much. I was going, in the opposite direction of the fertilizer. I was like, let me make it, faster and easier, and take pieces out so that it can be easier for everybody. And then I'm like, but this isn't the essence of what I want people to experience. I want people to go out into the world teaching Reiki in a way that is deeply rooted for them, that is really embodied for them, that they're not just there to check boxes of I've got all of these modalities, let me move on into to selling this practice. I want people who really are willing to slow down and take their time. And all the cost can be flexible, right, to make it accessible, but what really felt uncompromising was the time it was going to take. It was like, I'll be flexible on certain things to make it easier for people to participate, but I want people who are willing to slow down and take their time and walk this path of learning, to teach this practice in a way that is, authentic and in integrity with their own values and with the practice, and to let that integrate over time. And so, what I realize is like that might mean one person a year chooses to do it, right? And like then they're like, my business coach in the back of my mind, it's like, no, you need to like that's not going to meet your revenue goals if you only have one a year. And I'm like, okay, then this program has to take a step out of my revenue goals because this is how it needs to operate, right? And if I can work well with that one person a year and then they go out and teach in a way that you know is very, very powerful, that is success, right? That is absolutely success. And so yeah, that redefining success, in a way that includes getting our financial needs met, certainly, but has to begin with what is actually going to further the values that are instilled that brought me to this work in the first place. Um,
And
yeah.
again, what you said about what we've been saying about taking a break, maybe that means that you take some time to upskill and you learn, how to do payroll, or you learn some coding or whatever, so that in the meantime that you can find a way to take that stress off of figuring it out so quickly. And with remote work becoming more and more popular, it's, of course, I don't know all the answers and like how it's going to come about, but it just gives me hope that there's going to be more flexibility and ways to kind of like figure that part out. And again, going back to like the data and like what is like reality or something, there are studies that are saying like 4-day work weeks make people more productive, less likely to burn out,
Yep.
better with retention,
More committed to their
more
job.
committed. Remote work helps with people to have better work-life balance, or it can. And so, I am optimistic.
Yeah.
Mm.
I am as well. And I really, urge us, invite us to pay attention to the opportunities that arose from the disruption of this time of the pandemic, because for as much pain and suffering as is absolutely the reality of this time, um, there are also tremendous opportunities to reassess the sorts of things that we've been discussing, and that is actively happening, right? These conversations about 4-day work week, about remote, like, oh, we really can actually get our jobs done, not having to commute 2 hours to get there. I mean, I commuted to Mills for 2 hours one way for 7 years, um, and there's things that we need to value above money, our health, our connection to other people, our relationships, our quality of life. And that often does mean making our life smaller, perhaps, right? Less elaborate, less things, right? But higher quality of life. These are questions that are happening in mainstream media right now. It's wild in a certain sense. These were not conversations that were happening before this. And so we can lean into
Not
all
taken
those.
seriously.
Yeah, they were happening in smaller spaces. They were happening, in this like behind closed doors kind of way, but not in this like, young people are leaving their jobs in droves and refusing to work ridiculous additional hours, and then there's this like slandering of that by calling it with silent quitting. Is that what it's called? When
Quiet
people
quitting,
just
yeah.
when people just like are like, I'm just going to do the job you hired me to do and not like other things. Like, oh, so you're quitting? Like, no, I'm just doing my job the way that I agreed to. Anyway, um, that is to say that the sorts of things that we're talking about here and that you came to observe in your work and that prompted you to do this difficult thing of taking a pause and an assessment, are conversations that are happening much more broadly, and I'm excited about that. And I'm so glad to be in community with people who are really taking action on that and being in this process of reassessment and prioritizing, um, using these things that we've learned to get our own self clear and rooted before we try to move out into the world. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Grace, what's it's so interesting, right? Our conditioning. The question that came to mind is, so what's next for you? It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
liminal space, right? Who knows, right? So
Yeah.
maybe that's the right question. Maybe you have an answer to that question, but I think, maybe perhaps more to the point, I'd love to just end on what questions you're living into right now and what feels like it has the most meaning for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest question is, how do I do this in community? Because I think with the one of the big lessons of 2020 and onwards for me was realizing again that I don't live in a bubble. I do exist in community. I would not be where I am today without the help of many people that I am grateful for and cherish, that I consider part of my community. Um, and so now it's time to kind of lean into the reciprocity part of like, okay, how do I show up for my community? What is that going to look like? And part of that is through my practice, because that's what I have to offer. It's part of my gift. So that's the question. The big question is, how do I serve my community? How do I show up?
Yeah.
As far as what's next, yeah, it's a good question, because on one hand, I'm very much feeling like I need a bit more time to just reconnect with my practice and like really hone in on like, okay, really, what is it that I want to do? Because I could do a million things. Anybody could do a million things that feel really good, but what do I feel like is really pertinent right now? Like, I guess to answer would be like deciphering what's the 1 year plan versus the 5 year versus the 20 year. And I'm still kind of like figuring those pieces out. But I think like in the next year, I want to get my website up again, be a little bit more easier to find, and start doing some more work. Yeah, I think I'm ready to move in
Yeah.
that direction.
Yeah, and there was a piece that you said early on that I meant to grab and didn't, which is that, when you backed off, you took the pause, you took the website down, you started getting more requests, right? And that, like, that was so, it's like, okay, yeah, that could be coincidence, but it also could be I put my staff down in service of my values, and I started to root into that more clearly, and people whoop oriented towards it, right? And that was very heartening for me because I've, in my business and in my practice, have had a fear of really rooting into my values and stating them clearly and standing up for them, because there's this scarcity story that, like, if you narrow down who you serve and you narrow down, you put boundaries around how you're going to do that, so values, then you're not going to get enough people, right? It's not going to be enough, right? That not enough story. And it's quite the opposite. It is just quite the opposite, that the more clearly we articulate and shine and feel in our body, what integrity truly feels like to us, and we communicate that, like, the people that we're meant to serve orient towards us immediately and move towards us. And then we can do less, we can spend less time, we can be more concentrated, we can, have those meaningful experiences that then have those ripples outward. I love that you talked about interconnection and this paradox that we experience of having this single body and feeling isolation at times and feeling ourselves to be separate, but then this deeper truth of connection of life, and that's that's the thread that it sounds to me like you're following through this liminal space. And with this guiding question of how do I do this in community, how do I come back into the reality of being a communal animal in a challenging world, um, with so much beauty and goodness in it. And I just really urge everybody listening to, sit with that question. Like, whatever it is that you are up to in the world, how might you do that in deeper connection with other people? Are there places that you're feeling isolated, or that you're feeling like you have to do it all yourself, or that you're feeling like, success has to look bigger and better and shinier and more and faster? And is there ways that you could maybe reimagine that you could reassess that you could, at least, take a look at if that actually feels true for you?
And maybe that questioning is really hard because we've, oriented ourselves in a certain kind of way. That's kind of how I felt. I felt so like disconnected. And so part of the disconnect, part of the like turning off the website and not doing so much stuff was just to feel into how do I actually feel after I do my practice in this context or in this context. And then I went from there, like, oh, okay, I feel really alive. I feel really creative. I feel excited. I feel really connected. And that kind of helped me to articulate what it is that I'm actually looking for, because I couldn't find the words for a long time. I couldn't put into words what exactly it is I wanted to create, but I know what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such good advice. It's an intuition building practice, right? Notice when I take an action or think a thought or make a decision, how does it feel? How does my body actually feel when I lean into that? And then move in the direction of, whatever that good feeling would be described as. Well, and there is, a next step that you have coming up. You are in New York and you'll be doing a sound bath in April, I believe, at Brooklyn Music School. And I'm so happy for the people who are going to get to experience that, right? After this conversation, knowing how just clarified and distilled, and potent this work most certainly is coming from you. I'm really excited for the people who will get to join you. So for those of you who are in the Brooklyn area, we will put that link in the video notes if you want to join Grace for that experience coming up in April 2023. And I think that brings us to the end of our time. It's been so amazing to reconnect with you in this way. I mean, as much as social media can be a dumpster fire, like it means that we get to still be in communication, even though you went to New York and I'm still here in California. And we get to continue walking this path together that began in a tiny community garden at Mills College, right? It began with community. It began with the question of how can we grow food together in community?
Yes.
Um, and here we are. How can we heal each other in community? It's like we're still in the same question.
Yes.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And
So
I'm so grateful for it, really. As much as I feel like, I do this outward work, I feel like I learned so much, and I've learned so much just talking to you today, and in general seeing you in the interwebs. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful.
me too. So friends, thank you for listening, for watching this conversation. Please do share what comes up for you in the comments below. If you have any questions for me or for Grace, you can drop them below. If you have any resources you want to share, if you have found strategies for doing your work in greater connection with community, please share that below, because that's how we grow. That's how we learn. And as you move into your day, into your life, into your endeavors to find community, may you be deeply provisioned for it. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us, and we love you. Goodbye.